This is my family in the late 60s. That's my dad. I think Mum must be behind the camera. That's Lila, she's adopted. That's Merrick. That's Celia, she's adopted too. There's Julian. And that's Dom, another adopted one. But of course, he's different. He's black. You probably wouldn't see a scene like this in Britain now. Transracial adoption has been out of favour for 20 years, and the result is that black kids are losing out. Even when Dom was little, he knew he was different. One day, his dad found him in the bath, trying to scrub off his blackness. That's when they decided they needed another black child in the family. Me. This is where my parents came, to the crusade of rescue, over 30 years ago. It was the beginning of a childhood which was, by and large, a happy one.
My parents were determined to demonstrate that they loved us all equally. They didn't want to make any distinction between the black and the white kids. And they thought that if they concentrated on our different cultural backgrounds, that they would create this rift between us. It was really important for them that they made the adopted kids feel just as much part of the family as their own.
At that time, there were quite a disproportionate number of black children in children's homes, and it was predominantly white families who were interested in adopting them. And it was a time when everybody aspired towards greater racial integration. There was a melting pot approach to the assimilation of black people, people of a different skin colour within our society. And I think that there was a general feeling that these children were being rescued, may be the inappropriate and uncomfortable word, but that certainly there was an opportunity for these children to enjoy family life, and it would demonstrate to everybody the multiracial nature of our society. It was a brave attempt, I suppose, to say that we are all the same. Under our skin colour, we are all the human race. Sadly, that didn't prove to be the case.
Skin colour. That's all Dom thought it was that made him different. And Dom's sense of difference was shared by many other black adopted children at the time. Their stories fired the zeal of one of Britain's foremost opponents of transracial adoption. Lambeth Council was a springboard for a policy that has made my sort of adoption anathema.
I had seen and met too many black people who had been placed in long-term fostering or adoption where their cultural needs as black people hadn't been met. I know of one colleague, he's a close friend of mine, who was placed with a white family, and he was scrubbed in the bath with carbolic soap to get the blackness off his skin. And of course I'm talking about the 50s and early 60s, but such stories are unfortunately not uncommon. That sort of thing made me feel that we should not knowingly and willingly place children in that situation. That what we should do is aggressively go out and find suitable black families and black carers to care for black children.
Sally Baffor adopted 2 black children from white foster parents. She's convinced that white homes are not the place to bring up black children.
I decided to adopt because I wasn't able to conceive that easily. And I spoke with my mother about it, and she said, you know, Sally, you can adopt a child. She said, after all, when I was a little girl at 10, as a little girl, I said I'd adopt 10 children from around the world. Of course, I wouldn't do that now.
Smile, 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 smile. Keep it there, keep good.
I was at work when my ex-husband phoned me up and said he'd seen them in the Voice newspaper. So he faxed the photographs over to me. It was an instant attraction. I thought, yeah, we'll go for it.
Okay, well, warm me up for the cameras.
And the foster carers were white. And Arata and Lawe were the only black children in that environment. When we met with her, she told me how obstructive the children were, how uncontrollable they were, how manipulative she said they were, and also the fact that they couldn't ever, she tried to teach them how to use cutlery, but they just couldn't learn how to use cutlery, and they would only eat with their fingers, and they only liked bananas. And I remember saying to my ex-husband that, you know, I'm not going to go through with this because I can't. And he actually said to me, have you considered the possibility that this woman may actually be viewing these people children from a purely racist point of view, unconsciously, he said. And then, of course, it struck me that, of course, most of the things she was saying were the, you know, the negative stereotypes of black people. Bow down and worship me. Then after that, we went to church. And in the church, we were sitting there when a black woman started coming along our pew to sit next to us. And the two of them instantaneously got up and fled in hysteria. He said, Mommy, I don't like her. He said, Mom, because she's too black. I thought, really? What about me then? So I said, well, now, what color am I? And he sat there for a long time and said nothing. So I went upstairs and I got a mirror and I said, look at yourself. What color are you? Nawe? And he actually thought he was a white child. And it was at that point that I realized something was really wrong. And I called up my social worker again. We had a chat about it, and she said, you know, Sally, I think that this is probably because they were transracially fostered and are not used to black people.
Did I ever think of myself as a white child? I'm sure I didn't. I was just me. But to some, people like me are just in denial.
Transracial adoption really leaves the black person at a great disadvantage. And even though you may have some who will say, I've been through that process and I'm fine, well, you need to analyze them and look at some of the views that they will hold today about their own people, about their own selves. And oftentimes, more times than not, I think you'll find a great degree of confusion there and a great hatred of self, because you can't serve two masters. And what happens is that there, with black people who are transracially adopted, go into that situation, is that they tend to be educated against themselves and against their own culture and against their own people, and will be the most vociferous opponents against black unity, black love, because it will be seen as a form of reverse racism or something of that nature.
Who can argue with the ideal of matching kids with parents, their temperament, their culture, race? But that 60s melting pot has produced melting pot people. Many black people like me are mixed race, and pure black people have their roots all over the world. So what is black culture exactly? Of all the unlikely families to come forward to adopt in the 60s, Nimi March's is perhaps the most surprising.
I was adopted at 5 months
basically into the British aristocracy. My mother and father are a Duke and Duchess. I was brought up at Goodwood House down in West Sussex. And I lived in a largely white, conservative, small c and capital C environment. They had 2 of their own, and then adopted 2, of which I'm the second, and then had another one of their own. And they basically did that, I believe, because they wanted to share their good fortune with children who were less likely to be adopted, and at that time there were no rules about whether or not they could adopt black children.
And what about subsequently with black people? How have you sort of mixed in with black people in your life?
Well, it was weird. When I first came to London to live, when I was about 18, I got chased all the time by, largely by Rastafarian guys, because I was gorgeous. And
Quite simply.
but also, there was an interesting thing, because I experienced racism from different angles. I either wasn't black enough or I was too black, wherever I was. And the not being... The thing with the Rastafarian men was that it was at a time when it was considered high status to be with a fair-skinned girl. They might have wanted to be with white girls, but that would have been selling out. So the next best thing was to be with a fair-skinned girl, which I'd never experienced racism from that side. You know, black people being racist in that sense.
Within their own communities.
Yeah, about themselves,
Yeah.
exactly.
But do you feel that you lost out anywhere along the line culturally?
No, absolutely not. Because what would you do with me? I'm quarter Irish, quarter English, half black South African. What is same race placement for me? What would be the best place to put me? You put me with a white family, shock, horror, you're denying 50% of my identity. Put me with a black family, nobody's going to scream and shout about the fact that I'm being denied 50% of my identity, but that's the fact. So I think it's really difficult to define really what same race placement is.
The world has moved on a long way since I was a child. Multiculturalism is a reality in many British cities. So can it be realistic to continue to insist on matching parents and children like a game of happy families?
Cheers, Illy.
This is Illy's party, her adoption day party. It's to celebrate the day a year ago when she became Fufu Savitsky's second adopted daughter.
Thank you, Sean.
Illy was available for adoption from the day she was born. She came to us at age 2.5, having had, I was her 4th mother. Illy, who's completely African, from East Africa, was placed from hospital in a white family. They were brilliant. They loved her. They used to take her to the park, to the swimming pool, to the 1 o'clock club on holiday. I mean, she was a real member of their family. They were a brilliant family. And she was placed with an elderly Jamaican lady who loved Illy. Of that I have absolutely no doubt, but where there was much less stimulation. Illy was speaking at 17 months with the white family and singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and she was well up on her language.
Your favourite food? It's very unusual and very sophisticated for a little girl, isn't it? Snails and bucks.
She was moved from that white family so that her cultural needs could be met. Culturally, a Jamaican person is no nearer to a Muslim East African person than a white family. They weren't talking about culture, they were talking about race and only race, and it makes me so angry.
Take all the food out. The freezer.
It's just unbelievable that at 17 months a child can be torn away from the family that loves her, cares for her, and wants to meet her cultural needs. It's unpardonable, and it would not have happened to a white child. Never.
Nice and relax.
The story of twins, Jade and Helen, is an unusually clear example of how environment can shape black identity in adopted children, whatever the colour of their parents. They were both adopted by a white family and grew up in rural Lincolnshire.
I remember going to school. That's when you see, you know, so many white children running around in the playground and you're the only black person there. You know, the closest I got to black identity was having my hair plaited. You know, all the photographs that we had of our family were black, of our natural family were black. But I think that was about it. Because, you know, you're in an all-white area. What does one want to know about black people? You know, and that's just the impression that I get.
Do you feel that you slightly denied it then?
Yeah, I suppose so. But then, black identity, I mean, what is it? I suppose it's, you know, knowing your roots, your culture, and black history and black famous politicians and etc., because, you know, they make a big deal about that.
Just turn your head towards me. Good looking.
I was referred to as a coconut, you know, white on the inside, black on the outside. But then I don't have many black friends.
And what about your sister? I mean...
Total opposite.
Is she?
Total opposite. Total opposite. You know, she... her men she dates are black, but the majority of mine aren't. She's into, you know, she'll go to black hairdressers. You know, she'll always go to black hairdressers in Tottenham, and I wouldn't dream of going there. You know, I just wouldn't dream of doing it.
Why?
Snobbery, I suppose. She told me that I should be eating ackee and saltfish, which I detest. We question each other about our relationships. And I'm always saying to her, why do you just date one type, Helen? And, you know, she's just, you know, because they treat her nice. You know, they treat her well, so she thinks. I, on the other hand, know better. But, you know, we're totally opposite in that area, because I just don't think that they do treat you well. You know, black men, the majority of black men, don't mean to be stereotypical, but in my experience, don't. You know, they just don't know how to treat women. When we went to school, different boarding schools, I went to one in Nottinghamshire and she went to one in Brighton, and you got a lot more children there, obviously of different nationalities. So she had more experience with black people, whereas I was more surrounded by white people at school, at home, and I suppose that shaped me.
Twin black sisters, same white parents, but different friends, different influences, and the result is two completely different people.
I decided I wanted children, and I realised that I wasn't going to be able to teach them anything about themselves, about their history, about their culture, because I didn't know anything. And I realised I needed to move to London and get to know black males, because obviously my father's black, and it was going to be important. So I did that. I moved to London and started getting to know black people. That was when it really started. I mean, the way I saw it was that if I wanted to learn, I was going to have to. I mean, I realised. Well, I think by the time by the age of about sort of 17, 18, that if I wanted to learn about black people and about myself, then I would have to educate myself, which I started to do.
She was just a streetwise girl, you know. I didn't like it because I'd lost, you know, my sister had gone away to school, like me, you know, a country girl, and come back as a city slicker, you know, but it was, and I didn't know her.
Today, when white parents do manage to beat the system and adopt black kids, they're not only expected to be racially aware, they're also encouraged to live somewhere where their children won't feel isolated. And to me, that's a good thing.
I would say now, having had the experience that I've had, that it's important that adoptive parents, if they adopt children, from different cultural backgrounds, by which I mean not necessarily a white family adopting black children, but a Catholic family adopting Jewish children, or whatever it happens to be, to find out about the other cultural backgrounds that child comes from, because we have all these different rhythms running through our body, whether we're all black or all white or mixed race. There are lots of different rhythms because we're all mixed up.
So many kids needing a home. There's so much at stake. Decisions are being made on their behalf which will affect their lives forever. I wrote to local councils and asked them how long black children were waiting before being adopted. From the 30 or so that responded from across the country, the figure suggests that black children are waiting nearly half as long again as white children. But recent academic research has shown that it's the age of the kids that influences whether adoption succeeds or fails, not the race of the parents. There are proportionally twice as many ethnic minority children in care. So, to redress the balance, we'd need many more black families to come forward. Trouble is, as a survey in this week's Voice newspaper shows, willing black families are put off adopting by the cost and the bureaucracy. When I was younger, my adoption advisor told me that he disapproved of black children in white families, that my parents were trying to make me white. But now, even his hardline views are shifting. When I first went to see you 8 years ago, you likened my parents to missionaries and said that what they were trying to do was whiten me up to make me more acceptable within this society. It affected me quite negatively.
Yeah. On the I can't remember saying the whiten up, but what I think is still that many adoptive parents have, and transracially adoptive parents, have a missionary zeal. They have a passionate belief that they can offer something better. 10 years ago, I was passionately same-race placement, and certainly my views have changed. Well, if you were to ask me what makes a successful adoption, I would say it's really a meaningless question. A better question would be what makes a successful family, and who knows? I mean, I have some idea. So what I now think is there is no more certainty that a same-race placement will succeed than that a transracial placement will fail. The fact is some transracially adopted parents do a fantastic job and some same-race parents do a terrible job. Family life is a lottery.
The colour of the love is irrelevant. The fact is that children need to be adopted, and being adopted by loving parents is actually the most important thing.
We've left the old century behind now, with its fixed lines of combat. Children need families, and where they've lost their own, they need another. Nothing should stand in the way of that.